whether any prejudice caused to the accused in criminal trial for non-supply of the witness statements under section 161 CRPC. This question was discussed in one of the judgment. The judgment is that Padamati Venkata Sundar Rao versus State of AP on 13th February 2006. Citation 2006 1 ALD Criminal 585 and 2006 Criminal Law Journal 2168. Author M. Patsudu, Justice M.E.N. Patsudu. For this, they discuss to elaborately referred judgments are Pulkuri Kotaya versus Emperor, AIR 1947 PC 67 and 1947 48 Criminal Law Journal 533. Second citation is Surjit Singh versus State of Punjab, Baliram Tikaram versus Emperor, AR 1945 Nagpur 1 and 1945 46 Criminal Law Journal 448 and Emperor versus Bansidhar.
Judgment is that prejudice of the accused in criminal trial for non-supply of the witness statement is the core question in this appeal. Pulkuri Kotaya versus Emperor. The above landmark pronouncement is the answer. The Lord Additional Assistant Sessions Judge, by reason of the impugned judgment dated 31st August 1999, convicted the appellant for the offence under sections 307 and 328 IPC and sentenced him to undergo rigorous imprisonment for 10 years and to pay a fine of rupees 500 under each count, in default to suffer simple imprisonment for 3 months under both the counts, and further directed that the sentences should run concurrently and remand period if any shall be set off. Factual details of the case are: the appellant is the son of A2. PW1 is the brother of A2. All are residents of Emineni Varipalayam. There are long pending civil disputes between the two families over joint house sites and lands. A1 and A2, the son and the father, are accused in the trial. The accused developed enmity against PW1 and threatened him with dire consequences. The motive for the crime is the property disputes. The incident occurred on 10th August 1997 at about 5 p.m. near the village. It is stated that PW1 intended to sell away the house site to one Addanki Satyanarayana for rupees 14,000 and engaged PW5 for surveying the land in order to hand over the same to the proposed purchaser. Accordingly, on 10th August 1997, at about 4 p.m., PWs 1 and 5 and the proposed purchaser and others are measuring the site. Noticing the same, both accused and their family members objected to survey, and in pursuance of the same there was a quarrel. Thereafter, all of them returned to the main road. At about 5 p.m., the second accused again picked up a quarrel with PW1 and the first accused picked up a crowbar and dealt a blow on the head of PW1, resulting serious bleeding injury leading to unconsciousness. He fell in full of blood. Thereafter, A1 attempted to stab PW1 with the same crowbar, but PW2 and PW3 rescued him, else PW1 could have received the fatal injury leading to his death. PW1 is a victim. PWs 2, 2, 5 and 2 others witnessed the attack. PW1 was shifted to government hospital at Repale by PW2 and first aid was provided to him by PW9 and later he was referred to Guntur General Hospital, and on intimation from the hospital, PW10, the police officer, proceeded to the hospital and obtained report from PW2 as PW1 was still unconscious and was unable to give any statement.
Under Section 160 CRPC, the police officer making an investigation has power to summon any witness who is acquainted with the facts and circumstances of the case to examine as a witness, and under Section 161 CRPC, such statements are to be recorded by the police under Section 162 CRPC. The scope and application of Section 162 CRPC lays down specifically the purpose for which the statement is recorded. The sole object is to protect the accused against the overzealous police officers and untruthful witnesses. Section 162 CRPC intended to serve primarily the interest of the accused on one hand and to some extent to prosecution if the witness do not support the contents of his earlier statement. But the statement cannot be used in for corroboration, and it is for the purpose of contradiction. It is important to bear in mind that under Section 145 of the Indian Evidence Act, the use of previous statements of witness is permissible in the cross-examination, and the statement to the police is absolutely banned for all purposes except the one allowed by Section 145 of the Evidence Act. Cross-examination of a witness by defense in and criminal trial is a valuable right given to accused. Normally and usually, the defense would make every attempt to discredit the evidence of a prosecution witness with the aid of their previous statement, either by eliciting omissions or contradictions. At this stage, I would like to refer to the judgment in Pulkuri Kotaya versus Emperor, to which I made a brief reference at the beginning of the judgment. At para 6 on section 162 CRPC is as under. The right given to an accused person by this section is a very valuable one and often provides important material for cross-examination of the prosecution witnesses. However, slender the material for cross-examination may seem to be, it is difficult to gauge its possible effect.
The police sub-inspector ought to be presumed to have prepared a case diary which he was suppressing. The High Court rejected this contention, rightly, as their lordships think, nor has any such point been taken before this board, and the entries from the circuit inspector's diary are not on record. In the result, their lordships are satisfied that in the peculiar circumstances of this case, no prejudice was occasioned to the accused by the failure to produce in proper time the notebook of the police sub-inspector. Again, at para 7, His Lordship Sir John Beaumont is pleased to observe as follows. When a trial is conducted in a manner different that prescribed by the code, as in 28 IA 227, that is Subramania Iyer versus Emperor, the trial is bad and no question of curing an irregularity arises. But if the trial is conducted substantially in the manner prescribed by the code, but some irregularity occurs in the course of such conduct, the irregularity can be cured under section 537, and nonetheless so, because the irregularity involves, as must nearly always be the cause, a breach of one or more of the very comprehensive provisions of the code. The distinction drawn to many of the cases in India between an illegality and an irregularity is one of degree rather than of kind. This view finds support in a decision of their lordships board in Abdul Rahman versus Emperor, where failure to comply with section 360 CRPC was held to be cured by section 535 and 537. The present case falls under section 537 and their lordships hold the trial valid, notwithstanding the breach of section 162. Now let us look into the undisputed facts in this case. PW1 has clearly stated that the police have examined him after he regained consciousness and his statement was recorded. According to him, he regained consciousness on 26 September 1997. PW11, the investigator, also says that he examined PW1 after he regained consciousness. The evidence of PW1 that he was examined by police on 18th August 1997 and his statement was recorded on 18th August 1997. That is 26 September 1997. PW11 is the only witness who has stated that PW1 was examined on 18th August 1997 while he was inpatient in the hospital and his statement was recorded under section 161 CRPC. The investigating officer can examine any witness on any number of occasions, but when he reduces the said statement into writing, he shall make a separate and true record of the statement and it shall be supplied to the court and to the accused. In the instant case, PW11 deposed with a certainty that the statement of PW1 recorded by him on 18th August 1997 is available in the case diary, and the fact is that the said statement is not filed in the court or a copy of it is not supplied to the accused. Under section 173 clause 5b and 6 and 7 CRPC, the police shall have to forward the statement of witness to the magistrate along with the charge sheet, and under section 207 or 209 CRPC, as the case may be, the court will furnish copies of all documents including the statements of witness to the accused free of cost. In the instant case, PW11 admitted that he did not file the statement of PW1 recorded on 18th August 1997 in the court. When more than one statement of the witness has been recorded, the accused is normally entitled to get the copies of all such statements, and this right of the accused cannot be whittled down merely by supplying a copy of one statement. When copies of statement of witnesses recorded and not supplied to the accused, it cannot be said to be proper compliance of provisions of sections 173 clause 3, 207 or 209 and 162 CRPC. The right of cross-examination of any version of the witness with reference to a statement recorded under section 161 CRPC is indefensible right and cannot be circumvented in any manner. Where the accused has been deprived of the right of effective cross-examination of the prosecution witnesses for want of copy of the statement recorded under section 181 CRPC, that is 161 CRPC, it is impossible to say that there has not been failure of justice. However, the infringement of the said act is curable under section 465 CRPC if it is not occasioned any failure of justice. Thus, the main concern of the court of law is to focus its attention on two concepts: interest of justice and failure of justice. In this case, the second statement of PW1 was supplied to the accused. Therefore, it is not the case of non-supply of any of the statement of the witness. The earlier statement said to have been recorded by the investigator is not supplied. In my considered opinion, the unavailability of the first statement does not necessarily make the trial bad when the subsequent statement recorded under Section 161 CRPC is supplied to the accused and the fact of bias is not canvassed by accused at the earliest point of time, that is during the trial more so soon after the examination of PW11 and before the closure of prosecution witness. Further, the accused proceeded with cross-examination of PW1 with the aid of his statement. So, I hold that no prejudice has been caused to the accused, and even if there is an irregularity, it is essentially curable under Section 465 CRPC. In the case on hand, the main statement of PW1 was supplied. The alleged first statement is deposed by PW11 is not supplied, and even according to PW11, the witness was semi-conscious at the time of recording first statement. In my considered opinion, the unavailability of one statement does not vitiate the trial itself, as the second statement is filed. I would make myself clear that such act may, according to circumstances, need serious consequence, extending invalidation of the trial. Destruction or suppression of the statement or refusal to supply copies or withheld such statements on the ground that they are ruining the case of the prosecution will undoubtedly lead to quashing of the convictions. The wholesale refusal to supply of the statement will undoubtedly lead to serious illegality. Sri C. Padmanabha Reddy has fairly assisted the court by arguing that in a case of this nature, the consequence of unavailability of the statement of PW1 will at least make the evidence of such witness PW1 inadmissible, because the copy of the statement, the only material for his cross-examination, is unavailability at the time of trial, and it would lead to serious infirmity, hence ignore the evidence of PW1 altogether. When there is a destruction or suppression of the statement, and if it is deliberate, I have no hesitation to hold that the evidence of PW1 is to be rejected in toto, and it is not a case of wholesale refusal to supply the statement of PW1. Tilakeshwar Singh vs. State of Bihar. The Supreme Court clearly held that unavailability of the statement of the witness does not render the evidence inadmissible. Therefore, the provisions relating to the supply of copies is undoubtedly a great importance, but the approach thereof must be considered in the light of the prejudice caused to the accused. Considering the same, I am of the view that the evidence of PW1 requires close scrutiny, and after a close perusal, I am of the opinion that the appellant is not prejudiced for the non-availability of the earlier statement, and in fact, The evidence of PW1 clearly discloses that the defense elicited certain facts from PW1 on the basis of his earlier statement. In the light of above observation, I am of the opinion that there is no prejudice to the appellant for non-supply of the statement, and even if it is there, it is to very limited extent, and the same is curable under section 465 CRPC. The extent of failure of justice by non-supplying a copy of the first statement is not made clear. On the other, the interest of justice to protect the truth has taken the driver's seat in this case, pushing the failure of justice to dicky. Naturally, Superior Court will not interfere unless there has actually been a failure of justice. The Supreme Court in several cases held that whether it is illegal or irregular or infraction of any other provision of the code, it must be established that there is a failure of justice, and in fact it has been occasioned because of the illegality or irregularity. For the foregoing reasons, I do not find much force in the arguments of the learned counsel for the appellant to discard the evidence of PW1. Evidence for conviction under section 326 IPC. Even if the evidence of PW1 is to be kept aside, even then we have the evidence of PWs 3 and 4 who spoke about the incident. No doubt, PWs 3 and 4 are blood relatives of PW1. It is not a ground to reject their evidence in totality. It requires scrutiny. According to PW2, there was an instinct and PW1 sustained injury on his head. It is PW2 who has shifted PW1 to the hospital. It is PW9, the doctor, who has examined PW1. Thus, the record discloses that PW1 was admitted in the hospital and got treatment. Therefore, one important circumstance about the occurrence of incident and injury was established through the evidence of PWs 2 and 9. PWs 3 and 4 narrated how the incident occurred. In view of clear and cogent evidence of PWs 1 to 4 and the medical evidence, I am of the opinion that the act attributed to the appellant is clearly attracting the provisions of section 326 IPC. Hence, the impugned judgment with regard to the conviction under section 326 IPC need not be disturbed. Sentence and result. On sentence, I am of the opinion that the imposing of sentence of 10 years is harsh. In a certain quarrel, the incident in this case occurred. There is only one blow. Thus, the sentence of 10 years needs to be altered. It is true that punishment provided under Section 326 IPC is imprisonment for life. But the court commands the judicial first-class magistrate to try such offences, and admittedly the sentencing power of the judicial first-class magistrate under Section 29 Class 2 CRPC is limited for a term not exceeding 3 years or a fine not exceeding 5,000 rupees or of both. Therefore, the legislature in its wisdom has ordered the Court of Judicial First-Class Magistrate to try offences under Section 326 IPC, and in the rarest of rare cases, such magistrate is required to address the Superior Court for imposing higher punishment under Section 326 IPC. Considering the totality of circumstances, I am of the opinion that the ends of justice would meet by imposing sentence of 2 years and a fine of rupees 5,000. The entire fine amount is directed to be paid to PW1, the victim, in this case as compensation under Section 357 CRPC.
In view of the aforesaid discussion, the appeal is allowed in part, and the conviction of the appellant under Section 307 IPC is set aside, and the conviction under Section 326 IPC is confirmed, and the sentence is reduced to 2 years with fine of rupees 5,000. The entire fine amount is directed to be paid to PW1 under Section 357 CRPC. In the result, the appeal is allowed in part.